Thomas Mills with Restless Natives NC. We've been off for a long time, but we're back. And as usual, we have Anderson Clayton, the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and Travis Fain, former political reporter who's been covering North Carolina one way or the other for the last 15 or 20 years. And I'm Thomas Mills. Let's go ahead and jump into it. A lot has happened since the last time we were talking. And I think the biggest single thing was Tom Tillis announcing that he is not running for re-election. Not only does it have reverberations for North Carolina, it's really shaken up the national U.S. Senate map. And everybody's been looking at North Carolina, and not only is he out, we have two new candidates. I want to find out first, Travis, what do you think about Tillis's decision? Why did he make it, and how does it impact the race?
I assume that his decision was based on some version of, I'm tired of y'all. I'm tired of this stuff. Tired of having to swallow what I have to swallow to do this job as a Republican in 2025. You know, this is a man who was one of the people most responsible for the Republican takeover of the North Carolina State Legislature in 2010, which has had, been massively successful for Republicans since. They've been able to push their policies through over and over and over again, lower taxes, lower regulations, all sorts of Republican priorities. And without Tom Tillis, I don't know that any of it happens. And then, the party censured him because he wasn't mad enough about gay people getting married, and probably some other reasons too. But just kind of, the guy can't ever win with anybody. And, he's rich. Why not just go home, enjoy your family, enjoy your grandkids, and if you get bored, you run for governor in 2028.
What do you think, Anderson? I know it was disappointing to you to see him drop out.
I mean, I think Democrats were going to take a Senate seat in 2026 regardless, but I think he made our jobs a little bit easier by not having to oust an incumbent senator. And I think what it really showed, though, is that the Republican Party is running away from people like Tom Tillis. And you can't necessarily keep... I feel like, honestly, the whole, in my brain, it became the dog that caught the car, but it was like he just couldn't catch it. Tom Tillis is sitting there hanging on by a thread, and the train is dragging him sort of behind it because he's not necessarily able to sort of get on board with everything that Republicans are doing. And there used to be a day and age when you went to Congress that you did get to do things on behalf of your district. And honestly, I think we saw that. I'll give her props with Senator Murkowski that I think did this pretty well and sort of actually defended the state more so from what was happening bad across the country. A lot of people were pissed at her for being the holdout, but I'm like, she sort of did her job as a senator by protecting the state. And I don't think that Tom Tillis protected North Carolina at all, honestly. I think he got to put up the last little hoorah of I'm going to have my obstinate vote here. But the real thing would have been for him to have fought for the state and made sure that none of these policies were actually going to impact us and that North Carolina would actually get something for him voting in the way that which he did. And so, in my opinion, he lost on both accords. And I'm excited for Republicans to lose in 26 too.
Well, I had my take on Tillis is that he's really not a very good politician. And he never really figured out how to navigate in the Trump world. He would try to be this kind of independent, I'm going to stand up for what I believe in. And, I think at one time he said something, if it's the right thing to do, it's easy. And then he went ahead and did the wrong thing. So, he did that over and over again. He said the right thing, and then he did the wrong thing. And he was always trying to placate a Republican base that was never really going to be happy with him, but by always backing off of what he said he did, he also didn't placate a center that he might have been able to grab. If he had made a calculation that, if I lose, I'm going to lose in a Republican primary to a bunch of idiots, and instead said, I'm going to be the guy that everybody looks to as this independent voice who's willing to stand up to the power and speak truth to power, he could have weathered the storm. He could have brought independents into a Republican primary. Maybe he could have gotten past a Mark Robinson or Michelle Morrow. But instead he kept trying to play to them, and it never worked. And in the end, nobody liked him. He wasn't liked by the left. He wasn't liked by the right, and he wasn't liked by the middle.
My hot take that really doesn't matter anymore. I think he could have made it through a Republican primary simply for the fact that unaffiliateds can vote in whichever primary they choose to at a ballot. And like Democrats wouldn't have had a very competitive primary, I don't think, at least because of everything else that we see happening right now. But I just think that, Republicans, like maybe they would have had one, but I just feel like you would have had a majority of unaffiliateds that would have wanted to have seen the lesser of two evils come out of a Republican primary actually vote in it. And I think Tom Tillis would have carried those folks in something like that. Now, I don't think that he would have carried them in the general election, but I do believe that people negate how many people choose which ballot they go in and vote on when they're registered unaffiliated in the state of North Carolina. But
and you may be right about that, Anderson. Particularly with Roy Cooper being the candidate on the Senate side, it just changes, because you're not going to have that primary at the top. But as someone who has voted in Republican primaries recently on that very thinking that I'm going to have to try to drag this party back to reasonableness, and it has not worked for me yet.
Well, who was reasonable in the Republican primary, though? Like, okay, y'all could have said that somebody was better than Mark Robinson, but I'm like, I don't really know that y'all had, like, Graham, come on. Like,
better than Mark Robinson is a real long list.
I don't know about that, but to each their own.
Caldwell was normal. I mean,
Right.
he had some personality issues with, I think.
I don't know. State pension plans may say otherwise right now, Thomas Mills. I mean, like the state of North Carolina in the case that we're in right now, someone that's on pornography websites versus somebody who's taken your pension plan and fucked it over. I'm just saying, like, maybe one's as bad as the other, actually. And that's our problem, is that people want to make one out to be worse than the other instead of just associating them all the same.
Well, I still would have, in the odds of the governor's race last year, before the Republican primary, I would have put odds on Falwell getting closer to beating Stein than Mark Robinson beating Stein. So that was kind of my take. But back to something I picked up that Travis said that we're just really hearing, though we've heard rumors for a while. Cooper is going to be the Democratic nominee or the Democratic candidate. And according to all the sources, the last few days, he's going to announce next week. And I don't know about you guys, but for the last 3 weeks, I've been hearing everybody saying he's in, he's getting in, but nothing really from the Cooper camp. And all of a sudden, these messages now sound like they're coming from the Cooper camp. And so, what do you think about it? I mean, Anderson, let's start with you. Are you happy that the former governor who left office with a positive approval rating is going to be the nominee for U.S. Senate?
I know I said that earlier, and then I was like, man, the party doesn't take part in primaries in that sense. But I think that it's the worst kept secret in North Carolina politics of that. No, North Carolina Democrats are excited to see Governor Cooper enter a race like this. And we're on stop. We're going to Hope County tonight, and we'll be on stop 25 of the NCDP's rural tour that we're on right now. It's about 54 counties that we're doing it through. And out of all of them, the number one name that I've heard from folks throughout it is just we're excited to see him enter that race. Governor Cooper is it for folks. So it's exciting. That's no shade to Representative Wiley Nickel. I'm very excited to also have a good bench of Democratic candidates throughout the state. That would be amazing if he chose not to. But I just think that the party base right now is really excited to see him enter it.
Yeah, this was always plan A, B, and C, it seemed like, for the Democratic Party. And you do lose out on the ability to raise up some of... I think the Democratic Party in North Carolina right now has a strong bench. What it doesn't have is name recognition for the people sitting on that bench. And it is a bit of a shame, as you weigh everything, good and bad, it is a bit of a shame we won't see some sort of primary that raises up some of those names. But I don't know, Democrats don't seem to like... I guess nobody likes primaries but me. I like primaries. I like the way they sharpen things.
Travis, give us a 28. I think that's when you'll get primaries. But I think right now it's a lot of people also have really important jobs on that bench, right, that they're doing right now too in some cases. And I think that the the good reality of it is that North Carolina is the only state in the country, right, that's got 2 red to blue Senate flips in the next 4 years in the state. So before 2030, the Senate elections are going to run, or the majority for the Senate's going to run right through North Carolina, right?
That makes sense.
Well, I think that you know, Cooper. I'm a fan of primaries, to be honest. I think primaries tend to make candidates stronger. The difference is you're not going to make Roy Cooper any stronger a candidate. He's already tested. I mean, the biggest problem I see with candidates who don't have primaries are ones who really haven't been through. They're running for a statewide office for the first time, and everybody kind of gets out of their way, and they may have won a congressional seat or maybe a down ballot statewide race, but they really haven't been a top of the ticket race, and they're just not really prepared for that role. And you don't learn it until it's too late. And I mean, I think some of that's like Cal Cunningham. You know, he never really had. He didn't understand how much attention was going to be focused on him. He didn't. Something happened where he didn't grasp the fact that you have no privacy anymore. So I think those are the problems without having pretty contested primaries that make you really, that test you, that make you learn how to speak on the stump, give you awareness that everybody's watching you, and just build your ability as a candidate. Cooper doesn't need that.
That's true. Primaries are like practice. Like that is, and I think I see that right now just from the Court of Appeals in North Carolina. So we are going to have one primary in March on the ballot, at least for the Democrats. So that, or next year in 2026. So we've got 3 Court of Appeals races in 2026, just for folks that may not know that are listening to this right now. We've got 15 Court of Appeals judges in North Carolina. They sit in panels of 3. They are also the bench that said that, yeah, Republicans could throw out 67,000 ballots retroactively and they wouldn't care about it. But right now, we only have 3 Democrats on that bench, and all 3 of those seats are up in 26, and Judge Allegra Collins has decided that she's not going to run again for her seat on the Court of Appeals. So it leaves Judge Toby Hampson, Judge Don Arrowood, and then 1 open seat on the Court of Appeals for the Democrats. And so we are going to have a primary, and I got to hear one of the candidates last night sort of with their field pitch, and I also can see both of them right now. Judge Christine Walczyk, who's running out of Wake County, and James Whalen is going to be the other one that's running against her. And so it'll sort of be an interesting approach, I think, to see a primary in the Court of Appeals races and how different folks are talking about judicial races right now.
Are those the only 3 seats, or are there any of the Republicans up?
There's only 3. When I came into this job in 2023, I looked at our courts and I said, wow, we've got 2 cycles of hold, and then we've got 1 of take in 2028. And I think that Republicans are looking at the exact opposite. They got to hold both cycles, and then they could take in 28. And so for us, it's, you know, Allison Riggs in 24 with our Supreme Court. Anita Earls now. We did a check mark with Allison Riggs, but Anita Earls now in 26, and then 3 Republican seats up in 2028 on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. And there are 5 Republican seats up on the, or 3 Republican seats up on the Supreme Court and 5 Republican seats up on the Court of Appeals in 28. So we can take back both courts.
Well, I really hope Democrats have finally gotten it into their head that those court seats matter tremendously, because I think they did take them for granted throughout the first 2 decades of the 20th century, and the Republicans put emphasis on them, and we paid the price for it. And they're very, very important races, and we need to have good people in those seats. On the Republican side, we hear today that Michael Whatley, who's chair of the Republican Party, the National Republican Party, is going to step down and run for office, run for U.S. Senate for the seat, which basically means that the Trump campaign or whatever, the Trump
world
is going to get behind him. Laura Trump is not running. I've seen that officially announced, and I'm curious, what do you guys think about Michael Whatley? Travis, let's start with you. Let's get somebody who's pretty neutral.
He's a good candidate for Republicans. He's smart. He's an operator. He's got the full backing, it seems pretty clear, of Trump world and of President Trump. He's going to put up a good fight. I think ultimately Cooper is a better candidate, kind of across the board. But that's probably not a surprise for people who know my politics that I would think that. But He's a strong candidate. I mean, certainly nobody that you want to take for granted. That's for sure.
Anderson, you gonna take him for granted?
Look, I can give Michael Watley props for when he was chair of the NCGOP. I thought he actually was, to Travis's point, sort of a fair and also somebody that understood the importance of a ground game. What I think I saw Michael Watley turn into when he became the RNC chair, though, was a Republican shill. And I don't think that he is going to stop being a supporter of Republicans trying to restrict healthcare access for people across this state and taking away what 600,000 people in North Carolina got access to for the first time at the end of 2023, which was a doctor, right? And I think that his party has been the proponent of taking away healthcare access. And if that's what you now want to be, a person that's running in the U.S. Senate to go run on, I think we just saw Tom Tillis run away from it. And so I don't think it's going to show you any favors with the North Carolina electorate, what you caused and what you cost this state and this country, because that's also talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs that this administration has also now cut from coming into North Carolina through clean energy and through also looking at diversifying economic opportunities throughout rural North Carolina. And so, no, I think Michael Watley's got one hell of a record that he's going to have to now put up against that Republicans have handed over to him. Not to mention being the number one backer of election denial, trying to restrict and also retroactively again take away 67,000 student or veterans and also people that have been voting in their communities for years their right to vote from a Supreme Court election. The RNC was the number one funder of that, and Michael Watley, being the chair of it, boasted when he was on UNC Chapel Hill's campus last year about how proud they were to be funding that fight. And so I'm excited to go everywhere across North Carolina and talk to them about his record this year.
I think Anderson brings up a bunch of really valid points and fair points about Watley there. And maybe the biggest one is that a lot of this race is going to boil down to, Trump's big, beautiful bill, which, among other things, would roll back Medicaid expansion in North Carolina. I question when it will do that because they backloaded that bill so that a lot of the cuts that are happening, including on the Medicaid side, and I can't give chapter and verse, but they happen conveniently enough after the 2026 election. So it'll be interesting to see what impact people actually see ahead of it. But I think a lot of the media coverage is probably going to be people going to Watley and saying, hey, this bill, this major bill that's basically all of President Trump's domestic policies rammed into one, the clean energy stuff going away that Anderson mentioned, the Medicaid cuts, a bunch of other cuts, and still somehow we increase the national debt by 3.7 or whatever trillion dollars. I don't know how you cut this much that poor people and middle class people need and still manage to spend that much more than you take in. But Watley's going to have to run on that bill, right? And the question, the framing is going to be, hey, the guy who had this job before said that this bill was so bad he was willing to end his political career on it. Are you sure he's not right? And then meanwhile, the entire Republican delegation in Congress and the House, they've all said it's a good thing. Senator Ted Budd has said it's a good thing. Someone's lying, y'all, and I'm pretty sure it ain't Tom Tillis. So that's going to be what he has to run on, is the big, beautiful bill.
I have a take on Watley, and he's never run for office. And over the years, I've watched a lot of people who were very competent political consultants, political operatives, not be able to make the leap to being a candidate. Because a lot of operatives, particularly people who've been in Watley's position, who've been strategists, they become their own strategists. And they are too much into the weeds, and it's kind of like being your own lawyer or being your own doctor. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious. I mean, he may not be that way, but there are not a lot of people who make the leap from being really activist operatives into being successful politicians. I mean, if you look at most of the folks that they come out of some electoral position. There aren't a whole lot of senators. I mean, it does happen occasionally, but there aren't many that the first race they ever had was U.S. Senate. There's just not a lot of them. And the learning curve, even for a guy who's been around politics as much as him, is going to be huge, because he's going to have to give himself a new role, one he's never had. And, he'll have no problem raising money. He's done all of that. But he's going to have to figure out, how do I temper myself when I've basically been the bulldog? I've been the guy taking folks on. And at some point, I got to appeal to these folks in the middle. His whole instinct, his whole career is built around attracting the activist base of the Republican Party, keeping them engaged, and and for the last whatever years, 5 years or 4 years, whatever, his role has been sucking up to Donald Trump. I mean, my little take, my little snarky take is like, President Epstein finally got a candidate in North Carolina, and it's his own damn chairman. So, he's going to have to run under all of that. He's going to be, I think the Epstein thing is going to play larger than you think, not in the sense of being the thing everybody's talking about, but the thing that's keeping all those Republicans at home on election day.
Well, and it probably should be, right? I don't know that I've ever seen Congress say, the Speaker of the House say, we're going to go home early, to not vote on something that is that popular. Like, man, how popular does something have to be before you decide to adjourn Congress early because you don't like it, because you don't want it to happen? I mean, that's, I'm not saying it's unheard of. It probably has happened at some point in the past, but I can't think of it.
I was like, I think the filibuster causes it to happen quite a bit, Travis Fain, but that's
well, there you go. So, but I mean, in the Senate, yes, but I mean, just for the House to just say, all right, we just don't want to deal with this. That's wild to me, and it's so clear that President Trump is implicated in some way by whatever's in these files. That's not going to be a secret. So it just becomes, when does it all come out, and what does exactly it say?
No, but I think it will disrupt like the fabric of the Republican media that has made such a strong misinformation infrastructure, right, for their own political base, that has been fed a sort of narrative about what's in these files for so long, that has enabled and helped the Republicans' conspiracy pipelines from Washington, D.C. down. And so when you unravel one, you will unravel the rest. And that is something where I think their big fear factor right now is that they're running on misinformation, conspiratory systems, right? And the fact that people are not able necessarily to understand the truth about these situations. And that's part of what's made people afraid of government, right? I mean, like, that's just, they don't want to do this. And I think that's what's going to actually, to Thomas's point, start to rile up a Republican base more and more, is that people who are very much so interested to see what's going to come out of that.
Yeah, I think that, I think Trump is all over those Epstein files, probably. What's been shocking to me is realizing that the Republican base really, I don't think they tuned into this guy before The Apprentice. And see, for me, I've been watching him since the 80s. I couldn't take him serious. That's why I could never take him seriously, because in the 80s, he would, he was on the talk radio show. What's the guy's name with the long dark hair?
Howard Stern.
Howard Stern all the time. I couldn't take Howard Stern seriously, and there he is talking about, he's bragging about the junior Miss USA contest, junior Miss America contest, and that stuff was old news by the time he decided to run, and I don't think these people ever heard that. And they're living in such a bubble. Fox never told it to them. They didn't know it. And so for me, I thought the Epstein stuff was just going to blow over, because I thought, well, we've already rehashed this stuff for 30, 40 years. And in fact, for a lot of these people, it's never been hashed. I mean, this guy's been bragging about having sex with young girls ever since the 1980s. Back when it was when we had television shows and movies that encouraged older men to have sex with young girls, literally. And Trump was part of that. Now he's going to pay the price.
That would be nice because he's gross.
He's gross, and that whole culture is gross, and it was always gross, and yet there were a bunch of people who thought it was somehow romantic. Not romantic in the sense of romance, but swashbuckling guys, and now if they get burned for stuff they were doing in 1989, I'll be so happy. But anyhow, so let's move a little bit into the legislature. They've gone home, right? They're done with no budget.
Except for they're going to come back and do next week, was it Monday or Tuesday, the 29th, I think, to do veto overrides.
Right.
But yeah, that might be it. Like, we might not get anything more, at least for months.
And who controls the legislature?
It is decidedly Republicans. They have.
And why couldn't they come to a decision on passing a budget?
I think that's really interesting, and I think it has. Obviously the House and Senate differ on this, and the House has a new Speaker of the House in Destin Hall, and I would love to know more about the relationship between Phil Berger and Destin Hall, and how Hall is different from former Speaker Tim Moore, and how he's using patience and how he's using delay tactics as a purposeful negotiating tool, as opposed to it's just kind of happening more less purposefully. I don't know, but I think it's a fascinating dynamic because the Senate clearly wants to do some stuff. Phil Berger's got his own primary, as I think we discussed. The last time we gathered together here, he's got his own very serious primary and needs to show some results. But ultimately, what it means for the budget, I just don't know. I mean, it could be a long time.
Yeah, Governor.
They don't have a budget.
It just stays as it is. Policies stay in place. We don't have like a shutdown looming like the federal government would if they don't have a budget. You spend at the current levels, but you can't do new things. You can't address the big beautiful bill. We talked about what it's going to do with Medicaid. In order to address some of the things that are happening at the federal level, you need to pass a state budget. And I expect once that hits a fever pitch, they'll handle it. Look, we always have situations where the legislature won't do it, and then they do it, and so it always gets done. It's just wild how long it takes sometimes.
I think it's crazy that the one thing the legislature is sent to Raleigh to do, like, we have a part-time legislature. So for those of you that also are listening that don't know, right, legislators are paid $13,000 a year. It's supposed to be where they go a few months out of the year to do their business, and they've got another job that they do because it doesn't pay them to be there year-round whatsoever. And so I think it's fascinating that the one thing that they are sent there to do, they cannot accomplish it with having sole control over both the Senate and the House. And Governor Stein, and they had House Democrats even vote with Republicans on trying to push forward a budget because Democrats even knew how important it was to state employees to get raises, for teachers to have what they need, and to bring back up their pay raises too, even though Republicans have spent the last decade, to the point that we were making about when Tom Tillis and everybody maintained control over the General Assembly, had been defunding public education right since 2010 in North Carolina. So we're actually just trying to give teachers back what Republicans took from them to begin with anyway. And Republicans will not even do that. And so the funny thing that they are coming back to do is override 14 of Governor Stein's vetoes that he has given out to bad pieces of legislation that they have managed to come up with instead of passing a state budget. One of those being SB 266, which is just going to raise people's energy rates in North Carolina that Republicans are so dead set on being in the pocketbook of Duke Energy of, that they have decided that they're willing to come back and try to override that as much as humanly possible. Even when the BBB already promises to raise your energy rates over 18% because of everything that they're cutting from what Biden put into place in terms of policies. So it's a lot going on in Raleigh right now, or a lot not going on in Raleigh right now, we should say.
Well, it feels like the political environment for those guys, a year and a half is a long way, or a year and 4 months, whatever, is a long way away. But it really does not look like it's going to be a great political environment for Republicans. I mean, I think even if the Medicaid stuff gets pushed back into 2028, I think there's going to be a lot of people talking about it, and people are going to realize that they're about to lose their Medicaid. I think, to your point, Anderson, I think we're going to see a rise in energy costs that they're going to get blamed on. I keep reading that the inflation is starting to ease up a little. I mean, not move up, not ease up, but it's at 2.7%, starts to get up about 2.3, 2.4. People are going to be unhappy, and I'm looking at some grocery prices. The prices of eggs really have not come down. Gas prices are up a little bit. It's not. You're not seeing what Republicans ran on was making the cost of living a lot less. That has not happened. It may not have gotten a whole lot worse, but it certainly has not gotten any better. And there seems to be just this general malaise about the country that's not gone away. That I think people were hopeful that they would elect Trump, and it's not gone away. People still aren't feeling good. I saw something that said a majority of the people believe that we're in recession. Majority of people believe we're in recession for about a decade now. That's not a it's not
Well,
a
it
great
also
sign. And so
We're living beyond our means in this country, and that's a government problem. It's a personal responsibility problem. It's a community problem. A societal problem. It's just something that we do. If you look at like home values right now versus median incomes and how those have changed over the years, it's unaffordable. I'm so glad we bought our home when we did. We certainly could not do it now. Certainly not where we are, and that's the situation for so many people. And some of it is we want too much, we expect too much, but some of it is our policies. And I think the Democratic Party would do well to continue pointing toward them, and like the wealth inequality in this country it just keeps going up, and I think it's a real problem. And I think people are closer to pitchforks than the rich in this country really understand.
what do you think, Anderson? You think it's going to be a good year for good political environment for Republicans?
I think I'm gonna work hard as hell to make sure that it's not. But I don't, to the point that I made last cycle, I think I don't take anything for granted, and I also know that we're gonna have to work to help people understand what's happening right now. I think that we have. Republicans really have. They built up a messaging ecosystem that feeds, and that's the point that I make about the Epstein files is like there are genuinely people on the Republican side of things that attach that to Hillary Clinton. And when these files come out and they realize that that's not actually the case, people, I think their minds will genuinely be blown. But it is because of the fact that they have been in information silos for a long period of time. And it's a lot easier for people to fall down a misinformation rabbit hole than it is for them to know what the truth is. And I think that we have got a hard fight ahead of us. But do I believe that somebody like Michael Whatley makes it a whole hell of a lot easier? Absolutely. Because to your point, he's never run for office before. He's never understood what it's like to be in some of these local positions. I don't think he fully understands what it's like to be in North Carolina right now and deal with whether or not you do have to pay for gas or afford your groceries that week. He's been living in Washington, D.C., making a very comfortable salary and pushing out what every Republican extreme messaging there is across the country. Like, he doesn't understand what it's like to be an average North Carolinian. And I think that is something that people will relate to. They'll understand where Governor Cooper or whoever ends up being the Democratic nominee in the state comes from when they talk about North Carolina, because they've lived it. And right now, I don't feel like Michael Whatley can have that same experience. So I'm excited.
Well, I feel like we've covered a lot in a relatively short amount of time. Do you guys have any last words, Travis?
I don't think so. Watch the veto override session next week, and just continue to pay attention. I guess that's preaching to the choir for somebody who just listened to a 30-minute podcast with the three of us. That is appreciated. When people, I was a journalist for something like 25 years, and when people pay attention, I just am so appreciative, because I know Unfortunately, that is somewhat rare.
And it's hard to do, right? So we're hoping that this makes it a little bit easier. So we hope that you'll share it around with folks, and also that you'll come out. We're doing a rally before the overrides on Tuesday at 10 a.m. So if you're pissed off at Republicans trying to raise your energy rates, come on out with us. We'd love to have you there, right there in front of the legislature.
Bring a wide-brimmed hat or an umbrella.
Yeah,
Great.
real.
Well, I really appreciate you both being with us today, and I appreciate everybody who's watching and listening. We'll be back sometime in a few weeks. I've got a little bit of a vacation time I've got to go on, but we'll try to make this a regular thing. Thanks again. This is Thomas Mills signing off for Politics NC.